For the last 20 years, we've been promised, basically guaranteed, that meditating for just 8 weeks will physically grow your brain.
Oh, yeah, and cure your chronic stress and, just turn you into a superhuman.
Right. But what if a massive new scientific study just proved that claim is completely false?
It is kind of the ultimate modern prescription, isn't it? Like, you just download a mindfulness app, sit on a cushion for 10 minutes a day, and you'll somehow reverse the aging process.
It sounds so easy.
Too easy, yeah. Because the biological reality is far more complex and, well, a lot less instantaneous than the wellness industry wants you to believe.
So today, we are stacking up the sources to find out what is actually happening in your head when you close your eyes. We're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating mix of research for you.
Yeah, we're looking at a few different things.
We've got university psychology papers, including this really deep exploration from Bradfield College, plus a massive, heavily scrutinized 2022 neurological study from the Center for Healthy Minds.
And we are even pulling from a cutting-edge 2026 framework on mind-body wellness technology that, honestly, it feels straight out of a science fiction novel.
It really does. And our mission for this deep dive is to basically strip away all the mysticism and just look at the hard biological data.
Exactly. We want to understand the actual mechanics of how focus changes the brain and why the latest rigorous science is actively debunking some of our biggest assumptions.
And of course, how the future of relaxation might actually rely on engineering our physical environments. Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can understand why meditation is pitched as this ultimate neurological fix, we have to talk about what's going wrong in the first place.
Right, the terrifying reality of how our brains naturally age.
Terrifying is definitely the word for it.
It is a harsh reality. There's this pivotal 2014 study by Duo and colleagues, and they mapped out gray matter concentration over the course of a human lifespan.
And just to clarify, gray matter, that's basically the processing tissue of the brain, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's where all the neurons and synapses live, which allow you to process information, memory, emotions, all of that. And they found that the volume of this tissue follows an inverted U shape.
Okay, meaning it goes up and then comes back down.
Right. Your gray matter peaks right around your late 30s, but then between the ages of 40 and 50, it starts rapidly decreasing.
Wow, so you hit your cognitive peak, and then the structural decline just accelerates.
Significantly, yeah. And that natural atrophy isn't just about, forgetting where you put your keys.
It's more serious than that.
Much more. That loss of gray matter is directly linked to an increased vulnerability to severe cognitive decline, including illnesses like Alzheimer's and dementia.
So the structural clock is really ticking for all of us. And I guess this is exactly where meditation entered the medical spotlight, which is interesting because for centuries it was exclusively viewed as just a mystical or religious pursuit.
Yeah, the shift from mysticism to empirical science has actually been a really long road. It started way back in 1908.
Wait, 1908? That early?
Yeah, a Harvard physiologist named Edmund Jacobson started studying muscle relaxation. He used electromyography to prove that a person's mental intention could actively regulate their physical muscle tone.
Oh, wow.
It was the first hard proof of the mind-body connection. But, the real mainstream explosion didn't happen until 1979, when John Kabat-Zinn developed mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR.
Right. He essentially stripped the religious context away from it and standardized it so it could be applied in hospitals and actually measured in a clinical lab setting.
Precisely. And once they could measure it, well, the early 2000s studies produced results that made massive global headlines.
Like the Sara Lazar study, right?
Exactly. She led a famous study in 2005 where they took MRI scans of people who had been meditating for about 9 years, and they found that these veterans had the cortical thickness of people a full decade younger than them.
A whole decade? That's huge.
It is. The preservation was particularly strong in the prefrontal cortex, which handles your complex thinking, and the insula, which handles body awareness.
And then the claims just got even bolder after that. Like, Holtzel published a study in 2011 claiming that just 8 weeks of an MBSR program actually increased the density of gray matter in the left hippocampus.
Which is the brain's core center for memory and learning.
Right.
What's fascinating here is how the brain of a long-term meditator, particularly someone practicing Vipassana, which is a traditional insight meditation focused on observing things exactly as they are, how that brain structurally differs from a non-meditator.
So they actually look different on a scan.
Very different. When you look at their brain scans side by side, you see tangible growth in the posterior cingulate, the region that actively stops the mind from wandering.
Okay, so the focus muscle gets bigger.
Exactly. And simultaneously, you see a physical shrinking of the amygdala, which is the brain's primitive fight-or-flight stress center.
You know, I've always found it helpful to think of gray matter as muscle mass. Like, if your gray matter is muscle, then aging is like slowly losing your gains because you stopped going to the gym.
That's a highly accurate way to visualize it, yeah.
And all this science from the early 2000s was basically pitching meditation as the ultimate workout routine to stay neurologically swole.
Because, much like lifting weights, meditation requires intense mechanical effort from your biology. It is not passive at all.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics. Like, if meditation is a workout, what exactly is happening under the hood during a session? How does sitting perfectly still do any heavy lifting?
It actually comes down to a very specific 4-step neurological cycle that happens every single time you attempt to meditate.
Okay, what's step one?
The first step is distraction. Your mind inevitably wanders and your brain's default mode network activates. This is the network that loves to, recall past memories, daydream, plan your grocery list.
Right, I read a great analogy for this once in the sources. This 4-step cycle is essentially like training a puppy.
I like that.
Yeah. So step one, the puppy gets distracted and wanders off the training mat to chew on a shoe. That's your default mode network taking over.
It perfectly illustrates the next phase, too, because step 2 is acknowledging the distraction. You notice the puppy has wandered off.
Right.
Neurologically, this activates your brain's salience network, which is the system responsible for detecting what is important and generating self-awareness.
Okay, then step 3 is the act of disregarding. You actively choose not to yell at the puppy. You just gently take the shoe away. You let go of the distracting stimuli.
And finally, step 4 is sustained focus. You place the puppy back on the mat. In the brain, your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex takes over to keep your attention locked onto your anchor, whether that is your breath, a mantra, or just a visual point.
And doing that requires massive energy. I mean, we are always told meditation is about clearing the mind, like it's this effortless, empty state of zen.
Far from it.
Right. Neurologically, you're doing reps. The puppy wanders. You notice it. You let the distraction go. You refocus over and over. It sounds honestly exhausting.
It is an intensely active process, and the effects of that neurological lifting cascade down into the rest of the body. The sources actually point to an integrative biological model called the BERN framework.
BERN, like B-E-R-N.
Yes, which stands for Behavior, Exercise, Relaxation, and Nutrition. This framework shows that mind-body interventions operate through shared central neural reward circuits, and they all ultimately converge on a common effector molecule called nitric oxide.
Okay, let's pause on the jargon for a quick second. What exactly does nitric oxide do in this context?
Think of nitric oxide as the body's microscopic maintenance crew.
Okay.
When you engage in this kind of intense, intentional focus, your body produces this molecule, which goes to work dilating your blood vessels to improve circulation. It reduces oxidative stress and regulates your mitochondria, which are the energy factories of your cells.
Wow.
Yeah, it fundamentally alters your immune response.
Which perfectly explains the 2003 flu vaccine study. Richard Davidson monitored a group of employees who completed an 8-week mindfulness program. They gave everyone the flu vaccine, and the meditators actually produced a significantly higher concentration of antibodies in their blood compared to the control group.
Right, because of that microscopic maintenance crew, their immune systems were just physically stronger.
That is wild.
And Davidson followed that up with a really famous 2004 study on Tibetan monks. He hooked them up to EEG machines and found they could generate high-amplitude gamma synchrony at will.
Gamma waves, those are the really fast ones, right?
The fastest measurable brain waves. They're associated with intense, brilliant moments of learning, perception, and peak concentration. These monks were basically producing massive, synchronized electrical surges of clarity just by sitting and focusing.
But let me challenge this for a second. If the underlying mechanism here is just intense, repetitive focus that builds up cognitive reserve, does it actually have to be sitting on a cushion?
What do you mean?
Like, do I have to cross my legs and close my eyes? Doesn't any intense mental heavy lifting do this?
The sources completely validate that challenge. You absolutely do not need a meditation cushion to get these benefits.
Really?
A perfect example is the famous nun study conducted by David Snowden and T. Ramakrishna.
Right, the nun study.
Yeah. They analyzed the handwritten autobiographies of Catholic nuns, which were written when the women were in their 20s. And decades later, they found that the nuns who utilized high levels of literacy, complex vocabulary, and rich, structurally dense language in their youth, well, they were heavily protected against Alzheimer's in their old age.
So just the act of wrestling with highly complex ideas built up a cognitive highway system so robust that it protected them from decay.
Yes. The research also highlights how deep religious practices, like the intense focus required to read, analyze, and memorize scripture, they regulate crucial neurotransmitters in the brain.
Like which ones?
For instance, they regulate glutamate. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It's essential for learning, but if your brain overproduces it due to chronic stress, it basically excites your nerve cells to death, causing cellular damage.
Oh, that sounds bad.
It is. Intense focus regulates that glutamate while simultaneously regulating dopamine. So these alternative activities provide the exact same brain-protecting, gray matter-building results as traditional meditation.
Okay, so whether you are a Tibetan monk generating gamma waves or a nun mastering complex vocabulary, long-term focus protects the brain.
Absolutely.
But what about the average listener? The person who downloaded a meditation app, did a 10-minute guided breathing exercise every day for 8 weeks, and is waiting for their brain to physically change.
Right.
Because this is where the narrative of the sources takes a really sharp, unexpected turn into rigorous scientific reality.
It is a massive pivot. For over a decade, the popular narrative was that a quick 8-week mindfulness course would structurally rewire your brain. But a 2022 study published in Science Advances sent a shockwave through the psychology community and fundamentally challenged that entire premise.
This was led by Richard Davidson again, right? The same researcher from the Center for Healthy Minds who did the flu vaccine and the monk studies.
That's when he essentially audited his own field. And this was a highly rigorous, incredibly thorough setup. They took over 200 healthy participants and randomly split them into 3 groups.
Laura?
One group did a standard 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course. Another group did a health enhancement program, or HEP, which involved active exercise and music therapy, but absolutely no mindfulness training.
Like an active control group.
Exactly. And the third was just a passive control group.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What did the MRI scans show after those 8 weeks?
The bombshell result was that there was absolutely no evidence of structural brain change in the short-term mindfulness group.
Not at all.
None. The gray matter didn't magically grow. The amygdala didn't shrink. The physical hardware of the brain did not transform.
Wait, how is that possible? We just talked about Herzl's 2011 study that boldly claimed just 8 weeks screw the hippocampus.
Yeah.
How do we go from 8 weeks changes your brain to 8 weeks does literally nothing structurally?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at how scientific rigor evolves. That 2011 study only had 16 participants.
Oh, just 16.
Yeah. When you have a sample size that incredibly small, especially if there are people who actively volunteered and sought out a meditation study, you are highly susceptible to self-selection bias.
Because they want it to work.
Right. You are looking at a tiny fraction of highly motivated people. The 2022 study had over 200 people who were randomly assigned, completely removing that bias.
It's like comparing a late-night fitness infomercial to a rigorous FDA clinical trial. Like, the infomercial promises you instant, miraculous results in 60 days because they handpicked 16 people who responded well.
Exactly.
But the massive trial exposes the boring truth. So, is short-term meditation just a total waste of time for everyone? Should we just delete our apps?
No, and it's crucial we make that distinction. The participants in the 8-week mindfulness group still self-reported feeling much better. They felt less stressed, more present, and more emotionally regulated.
Okay, so the software of their mind felt better, even if the hardware of their brain hadn't physically upgraded yet.
Exactly the right distinction. Healthy adult brains don't just massively rewire their physical structure in 60 days. Furthermore, mindfulness isn't just one isolated thing.
Right.
It spans incredibly complex, distributed networks across the brain like attention, compassion, emotion regulation.
So spread out.
Yeah, the structural changes might be too subtle and too distributed across the whole brain to measure as a single, neat block of new gray matter in an 8-week window. The ultimate takeaway is that actual physical neuroplasticity requires long-term, sustained dedication. Like the Tibetan monks, it is a lifelong habit, not an 8-week quick fix.
Which brings up a very frustrating modern dilemma. If I can't easily rewire my brain in 8 weeks sitting in my living room and I don't have a decade to retreat to a monastery, how on earth am I supposed to get those long-term structural benefits?
It's tough.
Yeah, we live in a fast-paced, chronically distracted world where sitting still feels nearly impossible.
And this is where the 2026 framework on mind-body physiology provides a fascinating answer. Because the solution might lie in merging those ancient mental practices with futuristic, highly engineered technology.
We are talking about the auxiliary ecological environments. When I read this in the sources, it sounded straight out of science fiction. The idea is essentially hacking our physical environment to forcibly drag the body into a meditative state.
Precisely. The logic is sound, really. If the modern world is engineered to distract us, these new environments are engineered to synchronize us.
Right.
Let's break down the physical elements they are using in these futuristic therapy rooms, starting with sound.
The audio engineering here is wild. They use something called the frequency following response. They play a tone at exactly 7.83 hertz, which is known as the Schumann resonance.
Right, the natural electromagnetic resonance of the Earth.
Or they play 6 hertz theta binaural beats. But how does just hearing a sound actually change what your brain is doing?
It relies on a principle called entrainment. Think of it like putting two grandfather clocks next to each other. Eventually, the swinging of their pendulums will perfectly synchronize because of the subtle transfer of energy.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, when you pump a 6 hertz frequency into the room, your brain waves, which are electrical impulses, they naturally try to match that rhythm. It physically guides your brain out of a frantic, high-frequency stress state and down into a deep, slow-wave state of relaxation.
Then there are the magnetic fields. They completely shield these rooms from Wi-Fi and cell signals to eliminate electromagnetic pollution. But then they actively use low-frequency PEMF pads.
Pulsed electromagnetic field.
Right. Wait, I thought we were supposed to stay away from magnetic fields. How does wrapping yourself in one actually help you relax?
It is all about the frequency. High-frequency electromagnetic fields from routers or phones can be chaotic, but PEMF uses a targeted, ultra-low frequency pulse that matches biological rhythms.
Okay, so it's a good pulse.
Exactly. These pulses physically influence what's called cell signal transduction. In simple terms, it helps push ions across your cell membranes more efficiently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it improves your microcirculation, meaning your blood flows better at the cellular level. By doing this mechanically, it drastically reduces the physical cognitive load it takes for your body to relax.
Wonderful.
It's essentially giving your cells a massive energetic assist.
And then there's the light and energy aspect. They use near-infrared light therapy, known as photobiomodulation. The near-infrared light physically penetrates your skin and promotes ATP synthesis in your mitochondria.
Which is huge for cellular health.
Yeah, because ATP is basically your cells manufacturing their own battery juice. So this specific light is physically charging up your cellular batteries so they have the energy to repair themselves. Plus, they pump the room full of negative ion generators to reduce oxidative stress.
And oxidative stress is essentially cellular rust.
Cellular rust.
Yeah, it happens when free radicals damage your cells over time. Negative ions act as a rust remover, neutralizing those free radicals.
So what does this all mean? If I just step into a shielded biohack chamber with 7.83 hertz humming in my ears, near-infrared lights charging my cells, and negative ions clearing out the cellular rust, aren't we just outsourcing our mindfulness to smart rooms?
That is a fair question.
If a machine is forcing my body to relax, aren't we completely losing the actual discipline of the ancient practice?
That is the central philosophical tension of this new technology. But the framework explains it as a necessary integration, not a replacement.
Okay.
The environment doesn't do the mental work for you. You still have to engage that 4-step cycle of focus. You still have to train the puppy, but the environment acts as an extension system.
Meaning it lowers the barrier to entry.
Exactly. It reduces the massive cognitive load required to simply get past modern stress. Think about it contextually. Ancient meditators were practicing in quiet, natural environments, right?
Yeah, not in high-rise apartments surrounded by sirens and overlapping Wi-Fi signals and buzzing smartphones.
Right. The modern baseline of stress is artificially high. This technology bridges the gap between the discipline of an ancient practice and the harsh, overstimulating realities of modern life. It creates a baseline where your biology is fully supported, allowing your mind the freedom to actually do the heavy lifting of meditation.
So, to wrap this all up for you listening, the science is clear that your brain is highly plastic. It can change, and you can fight off structural aging.
Absolutely.
But maintaining that gray matter isn't an 8-week magic pill that you can just download from an app store. It requires long-term, sustained, heavy lifting. Whether you choose to get those reps in through a decade of traditional meditation or through intensely complex learning and focus like the Nun study.
Or by utilizing these wild new environmental biohacking rooms.
Yeah, either way, you have to put in the time and the focus.
And I want to leave you with a final, deeply profound concept pulled from the absolute bleeding edge of our sources.
Oh, this part is amazing.
It's called the EMI model, which stands for energy, mass, and information. And it steps out of traditional neuroscience and into quantum biology.
Quantum biology.
Yeah. There is a four-field quantum model suggesting that consciousness might not just be localized inside the physical neurons in your skull.
Wait. Are you saying our minds aren't just in our heads?
The framework suggests exactly that. It proposes that our brains might actually interact with fundamental quantum fields in the universe through ultra-weak light emissions called biophotons.
We are literally emitting light.
Yes. Biological systems, including our DNA, emit tiny particles of light. And the theory is that deep, intentional meditation might actually enhance the coherence of these biophotons, essentially synchronizing our biological light with the quantum vacuum of space.
That is incredibly mind-bending. So the next time someone tells you to just take a deep breath and clear your mind, remember, you aren't just looking for a quick fix to lower your heart rate.
You are embarking on a heavy lifting workout for your brain.
Exactly. And it leaves you with a massive question to explore on your own. Is your mind just a biological machine generating thoughts? Or is it a field of energy constantly interacting with the universe around you?